Okay, 6:30, I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. First things first, we have Ms. Manzelli is remote, so we have to take a quick vote and see if we're okay with that. So all in favor of allowing Ms. Manzelli to join remotely, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Right. And also, Ms. Sherman is ill, so she's letting us go home to us to not share her germs. So, with that, we are in the library tonight, just in case anybody didn't get the memo. The intention is that we'll be in the library going forward, as long as it's feasible. We have brought the camera down and everything, so hopefully we're all set with that stuff. So we'll move right along. Agenda item number 2 is public comments. So we got 15 minutes. Please try to hold your comments 3 minutes so that everybody can talk. And yeah, just give us your name. If anybody's got anything they'd like to contribute, come up to the mic on the stool. All right, seeing none, so we'll move on. Agenda item number 3, there are a couple of things to add. We are going to have non-public under small letter A and C, and I'll announce the meetings of those when we get to that part. And we are going to have one item under number 13 on the agenda. So on number 13, appointments, resignations, and retirements, we are going to have one item there. So that's a change. And Ms. Manzelli asked that we add an item regarding the process for evaluating superintendent. So might be a little bit tough without Patty here, but I think it's a pretty general discussion that Amy wanted to have. So I'm going to add that as a bullet point under number 5, and we'll see how that goes.
You catch that, Amy? All right.
Okay. Okay. Is there anything else that anybody needs to address on agenda review? Fantastic. So we'll go right into minutes. We've got the minutes from our last meeting in the drive. I'll accept the motion to consider.
I had one correction.
Let's do a motion first, and then
Sure.
Go into discussion.
Moves to approve the minutes of March 15, 2022.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right, discussion.
I just have one thing on page 3. Under my name, where it says special education experience, and then it says with LEAP, it's actually LEND, L-E-N-D. L-E-N-D. And that was it. I actually have a few.
Okay.
On page 2, where it says ELA requirement, it's actually HB 1671 bill.
Yes, please.
HB 1671 bill. And then take out the sentences work to support the subcommittee involving PHS. I don't know where that came from.
That probably, should be.
And then I have a couple like little grammar ones. I can't those, but under Ms. Camello, it's strong foundations, charter school, not organization. Top of page 3. And then under Amber White, it says of experience with supporting SPL. So it should be SLP, right? Okay. And then 4 lines from the bottom of that paragraph, their parental rights. And then a couple of these are just like word missing. Just want to make sure there aren't any that are. Oh, at the top of page 8, there's a word missing. If the guest is enrolled and not involved.
Everybody good with those? So sorry? Yeah, I would change the motion to as amended.
Yeah.
Okay, is the second?
Yes.
Great, so all in favor of approving the minutes of March 15th as amended, please say aye.
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 Abstentions?
What's that, Amy? Yes, okay.
Thank you. Okay, that brings us to board reports, and we've got Braden with us tonight, so I'll let you go first.
So, right now, it's a pretty calm time of the year. We finished with our biggest event, which is Winter Carnival. So now we're just kind of wrapping the year up. On May 5th, I believe, was the class elections. So that's when we choose next year's class office, so Senate and class officers. And then after that, we do our Senate election. So the Executive Council of Senate, so President, Vice President, Historian, and Secretary. We also have a possibility of a spring fling, which is a half-day outdoor activities day. So the first half of the day, we will be doing classes, and then the second half, we'll go outside, play some games outside, and just kind of relax. And that's going to be May 16th. And when you walked in, you probably noticed all the leaves in the entranceway. That was for the Eddie's presentation that just took place last week. Other than that, yeah.
Awesome. Any questions for Braden? Cool. Thanks for joining us. As always, you can peace out whenever you feel like it. You're welcome to stay. Got Mr. Coughlin, but he just came in and sat down, so if you need a minute, I'll make somebody else go.
I think I'll correct the sun maybe with the shade.
Sure.
Okay.
Give me a minute. I already got a bunch of the other ones. You just chose the wrong
We
spot.
gotta get back to the.
All right, we'll come back to Josh. I don't think there's SAU board or exec board. That's next week, so no updates right now. AREA committee also, I don't believe has met. I'm not sure when that meeting is. I looked at that. I think it is May, but I have no idea.
I think it's May 11th, which is also the same, I have a conflict, a school board conflict, because it's the same night as the scholarship,
Oh, okay.
discussion of scholarships.
I'm sure one of us. So that brings us to the principals. That was quick. So we'll start with Dr. Morris this time.
Hello there. As Braden mentioned, we had our Eddie's visit last week. I felt like that went very well. We had a number of students that participated in that, including Braden. And I felt like we had really good representation from our student body for that. Additionally, we had some parents who came for some of the breakout sessions to share their perspective as representatives of that stakeholder group, and I think that was also very helpful. I have not heard back from them yet, but as soon as I do, I'll be sure to connect with Patty and communicate the results of that. But I'm really happy with how it went and how we represented ourselves, and regardless of the outcome, I'm proud of how Pembroke Academy came across that day. Additionally, we had our step-up concert last week, and this is really an example of brilliant marketing on the part of Scott Thibodeau, our music teacher, and Colleen McDonald, our other music teacher, where they had a concert where Pembroke Academy students in band and chorus performed, but then they also had a few numbers that they did in partnership with 8th graders from Sunday schools. And so they came up and performed as well. And then those 8th graders also had some other numbers that they did independent of Pembroke Academy. So it was really a nice event, and I think a great way to continue to garner interest or to generate interest among our incoming 8th graders when they're choosing classes for next year, and to try to retain some of those band numbers from the sending schools into Pembroke Academy. So I was really pleased with that. This weekend we have The Little Mermaid. That's coming. That's our first musical since the spring of 2020. So looking forward to that. Spring sports have started. We had, I believe, 2 scrimmages, perhaps 3 scrimmages today. Yep. And Braden's reported that baseball did well. I haven't heard from Mr. Coach Coughlin, but I think we'll hear in a moment. But anyway, it's nice to see spring sports. You know, I'm outside in the morning when students come in, and we have a number of students that are bringing their school bag, their trombone, and their baseball equipment, and it's, you know, so they're kind of doing all of it. And then I am very happy to share that we have a Pembroke Academy Hall of Fame inductee this year, who will be inducted during our convocation ceremony, and that is none other than Mr. Roy Annis. He was the class president in 1967, and then he taught here at Pembroke Academy for 21 years, retiring, I believe, in 2002. You know, I had Mr. Annis as a teacher and as a advisor in the outing club, and we went on many fun trips, and he was, I think, pretty moved when I spoke to him about being inducted in that. So that was nice.
Awesome. Thanks. Any questions for Dan? I have one. I don't remember what Eddie stands for. Can you remind me what that's all about?
So it's not an acronym. It's more of a play on, you know, like Emmys or Grammys or, you know, that sort of thing. The official title is, if we are fortunate enough to win that, the official title is a representative of excellence in secondary education. So Eddie's is a little bit more user-friendly.
Great. We'll move on to Mr. Martin.
All right, well, I don't know if you got the email, but we did an evacuation drill. I don't even know when it was at this point. I guess it was last Tuesday. Speaking of music, we were invited by PA Band and Chorus to come up and view their short concert. And so while we were trying to figure out, you know, how to get everybody over here, I thought it was a decent idea to do an evacuation drill, which we haven't done in quite a while because of so many other things going on. So we evacuated the building. It took us approximately 10 minutes to get the whole building up here and sitting in the auditorium. The students did not know that it was happening. Staff, I did tell them ahead of time. It was nice this time. We had a nice presentation by the high school band, and I think our kids really responded well to it. A little Q&A at the end, and they were able to, you know, ask some questions of the music program. And then we, you know, another 10 minutes, we went back and finished out the day. So I think overall for the, you know, for all these students, this was the first time they've done an evacuation drill. We do many other drills, obviously, throughout the course of the year. However, evacuation is not as easy to pull off for, I think, obvious reasons. I know I keep bringing it up, but we are still working on our preparation for our assessment that's coming up shortly. Staff are going to be start giving some examples. You know, if you've ever, I'm not sure you have, but if you've seen it, sometimes it's more of a lesson on how to use a computer than it is how to answer a question. So, you know, they have split screens. You know, my concern is that they spend so much time trying to figure out how to navigate their way with the software that they don't answer the questions. So we're trying to do some of that for the kids so they at least have a fighting chance on it. And we actually assess what they know on how they work on a computer. Our sports also was off and running. It was nice to see the sun today, and I have not asked Mr. Coughlin if we can be on the field yet or not, but he's kind of nodding
Started
yes.
the field over today.
Well,
So
I mean,
that's a big step.
Yeah, it is.
And probably the earliest we've ever done.
So that's exciting to get, it's like opening up the barn door because it was like, wow, it's refreshing to get out there and see the kids out there. We also are putting on a musical, the first time since 2020, high school musical junior. We've invited fourth grade down as part of a transition, so they're going to come down next week, the 12th, and they'll see the full show with some of our other students. We're going to do some, in the past we have done kind of a modified version for students, but now we're going to, our fifth and sixth grades will get the full version with fourth grade, and we'll do a modified version for our seventh and eighth grade. And then we'll be performance at night also. We're really excited to see that going again. And also just kind of a management thing. We are in the process of hiring for next year. It's kind of hard to believe, but we have started interviews and we're going right at it. And my schedule is full with interviews this week. So, but it's a long process, but we'll hopefully get some great candidates to bring forward to in the near future.
Cool. Questions for Mr. Marston?
What is the date of the musical?
April 12th. That was part of what I was going to share too. So.
I got a couple. One, the SAS that you hit on the concern about, the computers and everything.
Right.
Is that, I know that's been a thing for a while. Has the state or whoever administers those tests have any sort of plan to make that better? I mean,
Well,
I know, but I gotta ask.
You gotta ask. If they do, I'm not aware of it.
okay.
I think, I've seen some of the, we don't use a split screen much for kids, because, we don't have it.
Right.
And so they have to scroll on one side, answer on the other, and then they may have to refer to a graph that might be a different page, and it's not like flipping through a book. So it's really easy for them to get lost doing that stuff. And then they finally just go, oh, that's the answer, because they don't get frustrated. So,
Right. And that's my concern because, some children have more access or less access to technology. So, yeah, kind of downplays what they know, like you said, and more about what their computer skills are.
Yeah.
So,
So we're working on it as much as we possibly can. It's great.
and then the other thing, you said you had a lot of interviews. So I was concerned about that with the market. I know I've got positions that have been empty for a long time, but you're getting applications and.
Well, I have 4 open positions. So because there's 4, that means there's more interviews. I would say each position is not chock-a-block full with candidates.
Okay.
That is a trend that we've been seeing even before COVID. And certainly now, I think there are, I'm not sure it was on the critical shortage list is much larger than the other list. So I don't know anything that's not on the critical shortage list. And so that's obviously concerning as we go forward. The pool is just very, very narrow. But at the same time, it only takes 1. So that's what we're looking for, to get that 1 for each one of those positions.
Good. Fantastic.
All right, so I don't sound jaded. What's the specific benefit to Pembroke concerning with the SAS testing? What benefit does it provide to the students, to the staff, aside from providing information to the state?
Well, any broad-based. Well, don't worry about that.
If it's just a hassle.
I think the part that's frustrating for me is it's like we've always had this some form of state testing. The turnaround is a little bit quicker on this than it has been in the past. It's like any assessment. I think it's it's a roadmap. It helps us with a roadmap. It's not a defining moment, and it certainly is gives us information up to where students are and certainly where our curriculum is according to that test. We use it as another data point when we're looking at students. We always want at least 3 data points for students, and perfectly honest with you, that's usually the 3rd with us because it's not as doesn't feel as useful as some of the other data points from classroom assessments to, we have a STAR assessment, which is nationally scored also. You do need some kind of nationally comparison, because, you know, you don't want to be local because, you know, you need something to compare it to. But it, you know, in my opinion, when this originally started coming out many, many years ago, it was for us to use it to improve curriculum and to student achievement, not to compare school to school to school. And unfortunately, I think it's turned into that, where this school scored this and that school scored that. And that's really not the intent of the original process of putting forth state testing. It was really to help us to look at where we're at. And of course, it measures against, you know, state standards. So, you know, you get caught between teaching to the test, teaching to where students are and what they need. And that can be a tug and pull.
That's pretty much the sign from are we teaching to the test, or are we teaching to the curriculum that the students need? So, you know, just.
If the test is valid, yeah, and there is, you know, an agreement that those are the assessments that you want to assess, then yes, you do teach to it, you know, but that, I think there's debate on that. Always.
Right,
But,
yeah.
like I said, we really need, particularly now, in my opinion, the baseline is blown out of the water because of COVID.
Right.
You know, you have to start over again. And so we have to create a whole new baseline. And that's not going to happen in 1 year. It's going to take some time to get a trend line. So that part to me is frustrating, because we can compare this year to 2 years ago to last year. Yeah, kids that weren't even in the building. So it's just a whole different ball of wax. And I don't mind the tool. It's just how we use the tool that I worry about sometimes.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Any others? All right, Ms. Garrett.
So similar to everyone else, we got a lot going on. Our calendar exploded, which is great. I'm very excited for all the kiddos and the staff. We are heading up to TRS on April 12th, fourth grade for the musical. And on May 10th, we have our K2 Spring and Growth concert. It's going to be at 5:30 to 7. We have a musical performance by our littles, and then art display throughout the building after, as well as our outdoor classrooms will be open for families to visit. And then on May 11th, our 3-4 Spring and Growth Arts Night will be same thing, 5:30 to 7. On May 19th, we have a kindergarten parent night coming up. I know I previously spoke about the importance of reaching out to our incoming kinders and getting them involved as much as possible between now and the beginning of the school year. Really, just one of the challenges we faced this year was a big challenge, actually, was really a lot of students were not in the kinder team space this year, and we're trying to get a jump start on that. So hopefully, if we can kind of catch anybody that we can provide some additional support to. We have a summer program we're going to look at to see what we can do to just additional time. It's really important that they're in the building, they get to know everybody, they build relationships. That's critical for their success. So we're really trying to be proactive, a little bit more proactive this year now that everything's opened back up again. Like I said, we do have a incoming kinder summer program. Parents will receive some information on our parent night. It's limited due to staffing, and we do have a criteria that we'll work through. Then we have a literacy and math program over the summer. It's an invite because it's a title program, so we will invite students that qualify for that. Again, providing that additional support over the summer. One of the biggest things is retention, loss of learning. We're trying to really combat that with the populations that need that support over the summer. So it's very targeted. It will be the month of July, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday from 8:30 to 11:30. Those are invite programs. So anyone, parents will receive it, closer towards the end of the year, an invite for those. Girls on the Run has started. They are absolutely excited, like beyond excited. There was screaming in the gym. It was good screaming. They were just thrilled to be a part of that. We have 30+ participants. Yep. 6 coaches in our building. So I think staff's definitely excited about that as well. In preparation for our arts night, we have STEM. Miss Jones has taken our iLab. They're out there in our outdoor classrooms, working away, clearing everything up. The kids love it because they feel like a sense of ownership. Like it's theirs, they built it and they help to maintain it and they help decorate it. And if you haven't had a chance, I definitely recommend coming out one of those nights to see what we have going on. Couple things similar to TRS, we have 3 positions that are open right now. We're working on collecting our applicants and we hope to start interviewing next week. And then we too are doing our SAS prep as well. Our technology coordinator is going into classrooms and doing that same kind of prep, getting the kids logged into the system. For 3rd grade, they've never seen it before, so that's all brand new for them. 4th graders, last year, a lot of anyone that was remote was able to opt out. They didn't recommend testing, so for many of them, this is also the first time seeing that program. So as you can imagine, that's definitely a challenge because they have that same navigation that they have to go through. So we're working on preparing them for that. And I know our 3rd and 4th grade teachers are working on providing like practice sessions in similar, it's like a live setting so that they can get comfortable. We used STAR testing this year, so it's really just made it a lot easier for the kids. They understand what that online assessment looks like. I think that's about it for us.
If I could ask a favor, if all 3 of you could send dates that you mentioned to Patty and have her shoot them to us in an email or Kathy or whoever. A lot of that stuff sounds like it's being fun to go to it, and I think I got like half of them written down. But if you want to summarize those dates of those concerts and everything, that'd be fantastic. Anything else for the principals before we move on? Okay, Mr. Goff.
So if I will, I'll try it without a mic, or do you want the mic?
Mike for the camera.
Yeah.
I had to try. Thank you, Kevin. Okay, can you hear me? No? How about now? So welcome back to the library. Long time coming. So for this month's facility report, I'm doing better. Sandy,
Yeah, like this.
how's this? Okay. I'm a hot mess. I just came off the field. I apologize. So for this month's facility report, I kind of wanted to change gears from what I've been doing the last couple months and talk about a trust fund that was created a couple years back for the vehicle replacement fund, which through the voting the last couple years, we've deposited money in there for a replacement pickup for the facilities department. So over the last week or so, I've reached out to 8 dealerships. I've communicated with 6 of them, and I've gotten 3 prices for a Chevy 1500 work truck. It's base model. We're not plowing with this truck, and we're not doing any heavy towing with this truck. We're just looking for a truck to get us through for the next 10 years with our basics, which is moving stuff from building to building, running errands, picking up supplies, using it for fields, etc., sanding in the winter, etc. So with that, I was able to get 3 prices, one for $36,000, one for $33,000, $33,097.58, and one for $30,869. The funds that were deposited for this pickup truck over the last 2 years were $35,000. So as you see, 2 of those trucks came in under that price. And I'm really just here to ask you guys for the okay to purchase a truck from Portsmouth Chevy moving forward.
Okay. Patty, can you hear me? Guess not. Yeah. Patty, can you hear me? Hey. So could you hear Josh? Yeah, okay. So correct me if I'm wrong. I think we are agents to expend on that trust fund, but I believe it requires a public hearing. Is that correct? Okay. So, open to the board then. Questions for Josh about the truck? Intention to move forward? So this was pretty expected. I think, when we set up the trust fund, it was said that probably within the next year or so, we'd need to buy a truck. We have, a fairly regular cycle of putting money in there now. And Josh's plan that involves the truck and one van.
So the van, I'll be back next year. So the van, in theory, the second half of the funds will be deposited at the end of this year. I'll come back to you and ask you for the van next year. Then the heavy deposits on those two vehicles slow down and get spread out as opposed to half the last 2 years for the van and half 2 years and 3 years ago for the truck. So we'll lower those and we'll spread those out. I would like to add one more though.
Sure.
I am asking for the $30,869 one for obvious reasons. I just want to be proactive and say it is a very hard moving target out there. I spoke with them today. That truck is on the lot and they are expecting me to hopefully call them tomorrow, but something could happen from now till then. It's not like I put money down for obvious reasons. I just would ask that if for some reason that vehicle wasn't there, that I could go to the next option, which was $33,097.58. That dealership had multiple of the same trucks on the lot. And I would just ask for that secondary, okay, if something was to happen.
Okay. Patty, could we possibly, if the board is available, do the public hearing directly prior to our next scheduled meeting, like at 6 p.m. instead of 6:30? Okay. What's the preference for you guys? You can do 6:30. Yeah, I don't think that'll take long. Okay. So do we need a motion for Josh tonight? Okay, so any other questions? Is there anything, details about the truck? It's just a work truck?
It's basic as it gets. It's literally called the Chevy 1500 work truck. These days, a work truck has power windows and a backup camera, as opposed to our truck now still has the crank windows. The only add-ons to that part is we have asked for a beacon light or a plow light, which is a light on top to be installed for obvious safety reasons. Our crew is out there at all times of the day, and as you see with all our new machines, we've incorporated that and a spray-on bed liner, which wasn't standard. So with those two smaller prices, it's still cheaper than the third one.
And just to put it out there again for the public that might be listening, I think it's important to say that the current truck is not super high mileage, but the way that the trucks are used in this type of setting, there's a lot of idle time, there's a lot of heavy work. And I guess the best way to put it is evaluating the work trucks at a school district or a town is not really the same as evaluating a truck that you're going to drive back and forth to work. It's not, it's kind of an apples to oranges thing.
Correct.
So, okay. So, I mean, we could do this a couple of ways. I suppose we could make a motion of, up to the higher of the $2 amounts for Josh with the, direction to purchase the cheaper one if possible. Leave it open to you guys. Okay. Somebody want to say it out loud? What if we say up to 34? That covers the bottom two, right?
Yes, it will. That might even get me truck lettering.
Wow.
If you're feeling generous.
Depends on what you're spending.
I'll move to authorize Mr. Coughlin to expend up to $34,000 for the purchase of a new Chevy 1500 pickup for Pembroke School District.
I'll second it.
Okay, any further discussion?
Does it have Bluetooth?
Mhm.
believe it does, but I'll have to get back to you, Gene.
Amy, do you have any questions about the truck, Amy?
Okay.
All right, so we got a motion and a second. If there's no more questions, all in favor of, authorizing Mr. Kaufman to spend up to $34,000 in purchase of a new Chevy 1500 work truck, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Great. Thanks for getting those prices. Thanks for getting so many. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
And we will, do you want to stick to 6:30?
Yeah.
For next time? Right. So we will make a note, and on our next agenda, our work session, which is 2 weeks from tonight, so that puts it at April 19, I believe. We'll stick to our normal 6:30 start time, but at 6:30, we will have a public hearing to hear any questions, concerns, input around the transfer of funds from the vehicle trust fund to cover the cost of the new truck. And that's the end of board reports. I'm not sure, when I wrote
I just
down,
have-
oh, go ahead.
What was the score?
9-1.
You guys?
Us?
Good guys, but it was a scrimmage.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I'm not sure how I said this, but when I spoke about adding the superintendent evaluation item, I wrote it on my sheet as a bullet under number 5. That was wrong. It should have been added under number 8, media business. So not sure if I said that out loud, but we'll do it then. Sure. So we'll move on to number 6, which is consent agenda, and I don't believe we have anything for that right now. Same with gifts and donations. So that brings us to number 8, immediate business. So our first item under there, we have Mr. James Garvin with us today to talk a little bit about the Grange building, the schoolhouse building, whichever name we prefer tonight, to give the public and possibly new members of the board a little bit of background. I think this all came about a handful of years ago when there was some discussion about adding that building to the historical register, and there was some search as to who actually owned it, and turns out that's us. And it does have some significance historically, which Mr. Garvin will explain to us. And specifically why he's here tonight is there is an opportunity from the state government every year for conservation grants through the Moose License Plate Program. And being that it is publicly owned, and for the purposes of this program, we are considered a subsidiary of the town government, so it counts. There's an available grant up to $10,000 that we might be able to get towards rehabbing that building a little bit. So up until a couple of years ago, the building was used for the Pembroke Range, who was sort of leasing it from us for $1 a year. But then the ceiling fell in, so they had to evacuate. We have spent some money in the past couple of years taking down some trees, in the ballpark of $5,000 or $6,000.
Give or take.
Yep.
And we
So,
fixed the brick this year.
oh yeah, and a car hit the brick last year, I think on 4th of July, so that was repaired as well. So anyway, I'll let Mr. Garvin give us some history, and then we'll have a little discussion. Thank you very much for joining us.
We have handouts.
And I hate to do it to you, but I do have to ask you to talk into a mic so that people on the computer can hear you.
You got it.
Thank you.
Well, I want to thank you for letting me be here. I'm going to try to be brief, and Andy, you've already given essentially what's on the second sheet of paper that I just handed out, a really good report on the history of the building. The building, as it turns out, when you look back into the history of it, is a very important building. It's one of the best preserved of the old one-room or district schoolhouses remaining in New Hampshire. And it was built in 1851 as a model schoolhouse. Pembroke was very proud of that building when it was built. The town reports praised it, as they should have. It was part of a major statewide school reform movement, which was led by the Commissioner of Common Schools, who would be comparable to the Commissioner of the Board of Education, or the Department of Education today. Very substantial building, built of locally fired bricks and locally quarried granite. And it remains in excellent condition, even though it was bumped a year ago by an automobile, and even though, as Andy has said, the plaster ceiling dropped a couple of years ago, and in so doing took down a suspended ceiling below that. So it made kind of a mess in the building, which has largely been cleaned up on the interior. But the building has been unoccupied, had been previously occupied and very well cared for by the Pembroke Grange, number 111. As you already know, the school board didn't realize that it was anything other than a Grange building for many years. It stood there with the Grange sign over the front door. But it turned out that back in 1946, when it ceased to be used as a district schoolhouse, a one-room schoolhouse, the vote of the school department at that time was always to maintain or retain the building as a historical monument and as a monument in the history of education in Pembroke. And that remained as the status quo without any particular problem for the school board, given that the Grange was taking care of the building during much of that time. With the vacating of the building from the Grange's care, it has been a bit of a problem and a worry, especially because it's not one of your main purposes and one of your main agenda items, something you didn't even know that you had the ownership of until a couple of years ago. I worked for a number of years. I may not have introduced myself adequately. I'm Jim Garvin from North Pembroke, but for a number of years, 24 years, I worked for the State Historic Preservation Office. And as both a resident of Pembroke and a state architectural historian, I was asked by a couple of residents of the community way back around 2005 to look into the history of the building and actually prepare the paperwork to make it eligible for the New Hampshire State Register of Historic Places, and a second set of paperwork to make it eligible for being listed in the National Register of Historic Places. Neither one of those things happened, and that's not important because the building was found by the proper review authority at the Division of Historical Resources to be eligible for those two registers. And as Andy may have indicated to you, just the eligibility itself makes the building also eligible for a conservation license plate grant. Now, the second sheet that I gave you without the pictures is a summary of a webinar that I attended just a couple of days ago on the subject of conservation license plate grants. This is a program that's funded by those what are called often moose plates that people buy voluntarily for their vehicles. Costs a little extra money to buy one, $30-some more than it would to buy a numbered plate of an ordinary type. But that money goes into a fund which is partly used for a grants program for historic preservation, partly used for conservation around the state in natural land preservation. And some of it even goes to the state library for the conservation of rare books and documents and archival materials. So the voluntary purchase of those moose plates does a lot of good. And as it turns out, and you run down this list, the reason I gave you these handouts is so you can do this at your leisure after the meeting tonight. But this sums up the outcome of the meeting. And the most interesting outcome of that meeting of a couple of days ago was, as you can see down toward the bottom of the sheet, that the $10,000 stipend that was available for historic buildings under this program has been raised this year to $20,000. And as I understand it, the estimates that have been at least informally gathered for the repair of the ceiling in the schoolhouse probably were for more than $10,000 to do the entire job. But we can hope that they would be less than $20,000. What I was told by the Division of Historical Resources, where I used to work, the people who gave the presentation a couple of days ago, is that given the generous purchase of the conservation license plates around the state, that their funding has grown considerably over the years, and this has allowed them to double the monetary award that's available for the applicants of a conservation license plate project. So that could be good news. The other point on this is that quite often they do give the maximum amount that's requested. In other words, they don't have to prorate it as LCHIP or some of the other programs sometimes do if there is a much greater monetary request than there is money available. So things look hopeful. One of the things that I wanted to mention is that in order to make a grant proposal in this program stronger, it's important to have a historic building assessment report. This is a report that's not mandatory in the program, but it's recommended because it backs up any monetary estimate that a contractor may submit, and it states in a variety of terms, briefly but succinctly, that the importance of the project and the importance of the building and why this should be funded. And I have written over my career some 200 or 250 of those reports. And I would, if you would like to proceed with this project, I would very much like to volunteer to write another one, 250 first or whatever it may be, for this building to try to bolster the strength of the grant proposal if you wish to go down that route. So this is an informational presentation tonight. That's why I put a lot of this on paper so that you could consider it later. But as you may see down toward the bottom of the page, there are some deadlines for this program. The first is at the month from today, May 6th, a month from tomorrow. That's the deadline to submit to the program a letter of intent to apply for a grant. So you have about a month to decide whether or not you would like to apply for a grant. But that deadline does need to be met. And so this gives you the opportunity for the next 4 weeks to think about whether you want to pursue this or not. And the second deadline, which is the most important one, is June 24th, 2022. That's the deadline for the finished application. And if you do wish to go down this route, I will be happy also to work on the application with any of you who may be in charge of it or may wish to sign it ultimately as the applicant. And that is sort of the deadline by which, if we want to do this, and by which we would need to have a historic building assessment report, that I would have to have access to the building in order to be able to photograph the building and make notes of its structural condition and its needs and so forth. That's all an important part of the narrative of such a report. So that is basically what I have to come here to tell you. If you have any questions for me, then I'd be very happy to talk about any matter that isn't very clear or that I haven't even touched upon at all tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate all the information. To give a little more color, this is something that Mr. Garvin came and talked to us about pre-COVID. We kind of lost touch, but we didn't want it to fall off the plate. So I got in touch a few weeks ago, and it turns out that the deadlines are coming up pretty fast. So I want to invite Mr. Garvin to come and give you some insight. I think that overall, what this board has to decide is a couple of things. One is if we want to go ahead with trying to get a grant to rehab that building somewhat. Longer term, I think we need to decide if we intend to keep that building, and if not, what we intend to do with it. So I think those are kind of separate things. In my mind, we probably don't make a decision on either one tonight, but since we have Mr. Garvin here, certainly if you have any questions, now's the time. And the last thing is I did take it upon myself to bring Mr. Coughlin in the loop on this, and because the deadline is fairly short. So I met with him. I actually got to go in that building for the first time, which I was excited to do, and asked him to reach out to a couple of contractors to get some basic quotes on what it would take to fix the ceiling. So it wasn't the entire ceiling that fell down. It was a good chunk of it, maybe 2/3. There was a quote from back when it happened that was, I think, around $8,000 to fix the part that was broken. I asked Josh if he could reach out and try to get some numbers on what it would take to fix the whole ceiling, have the plaster, the drop ceiling that's there taken down and do that. So he just let me know today that he heard back from a contractor. They gave him a number of 11,800, which now with this new limit of 20,000 rather than 10,000, that falls squarely underneath there. So I'll open it up for discussion, questions for Jim, questions for Josh, anything that you want to talk about. You know, I guess to open it up, in my mind, if there's free money and we can make that building habitable again, it seems like the right thing to do. But you know, if we can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
You said we should rehab it, Amy? Should get that, Sandy.
More money, if money is available, we should.
I have a couple questions.
Sure.
First question is, if we rehab it and if we are just decide to get rid of it, if we decide to keep it, that's great, wonderful, then definitely. But if we're getting rid of it, would it make a difference? Would rehabbing it actually make a difference and make it easier to sell, more value in selling it? So just questions for
I mean,
thought.
I would think so, but I guess if I can change direction with that just a little, are there stipulations on these grants that ownership would be retained for a certain number of years after or anything like that?
No, not with the Moose Plate Grant Program, with LCHIP, which is a much larger grant program, some of you may be familiar with. Because the monetary grants are considerably larger, there is a term preservation easement that's put on most of those buildings. That means that they have to be kept in not necessarily the same ownership, but in the same level of condition that they were put in by the publicly funded grant. But for the conservation license plates, there is no term, there's no stipulated type of stewardship program that's required after the grant has been expended. That is, you don't have to maintain the building in the same condition or better, though it would be good to do if you could. No, it's a very generous program. And the other remarkable thing about it is that it's a non-matching grant. It's free money, and you don't have to match it dollar for dollar if you do with LCHIP or some of the other most of the other grant programs, including federal grants. So it's a very generous program indeed. And to go to your next question.
Is there somewhere we can find what the grant application looks like, what it's asking for?
What I was told the other day is that the grant application has not been posted, and that it will be given to anybody who sends a letter of intent to apply. And I don't really understand why. I do have in my files older grant applications of the same program, because we were looking into this 2 or 3 or more years ago. And it's very simple. Basically, it just tells who's the owner and why it's significant that the building be preserved, something of its history, all of which would be amplified by a report, a supplementary report, which would go into that much more fully. It does not require all kinds of fiscal information about the school department or any detailed documentation except what focuses on the building itself. So it's a very easy grant application. And of course, this program is a very popular program too, because it's been made friendly, publicly friendly, and it's not difficult to apply. And it hasn't been difficult to receive these grants either. They've been very generously applied across the state for more than the last decade, like 15 or 20 years now.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
If we got money.
Patty, is there anything that you want to add to this discussion? So I guess second meeting of the month, we've been doing the work sessions. We could discuss this again then and give everybody a chance to chew on it. But I guess I'd like to hear, heard Amy's opinion. general consensus from the rest of the board on current feelings at this initial stage?
I'm all for it. I think I was just on website here and there may be something that I just came across. Jim, SCC 2022 grant application form, would that be it possibly?
That should be it. Did you find it?
I think so.
Good, then, excellent. Yeah, that's all right, then good, then you can look at it as best you can on the laptop there. You'll see it's a very simple application.
Thank you.
I kind of agree with Amy. There's free money out there and it's going to cover the cost and bring it to where it needs to be. But then I think further down the road, we need to have a discussion of like, what do we permanently want to do with this building?
Right?
I would agree with Melanie on that, and it seems like it's saying it's a fairly simple application and you're willing to do much of the legwork on that, which I think also be a plus.
Could I ask one, or could I mention one thing about this, this whole situation? Was Steve Fowler, who's involved with the Grange, is at another meeting tonight, the Suncook committee meeting. Could not be here. And I don't know whether the board would be interested in potentially reaffiliating with the Grange, which was a good custodian of the building for so many years. But they have been consistently anxious about the building. And a couple of years ago, I attended a meeting in this room with you, some of you, not all of you, and we talked about the building at that time. And Jim Batchelder, who is the master of the Grange, was with us that evening. And I suspect that I think that point that Andy mentioned of future custodianship of the building, future ownership and care of the building is crucial. No building, even if it's put in great condition, is going to stay in great condition if it doesn't have some friends. And so that's another issue that really does need to be approached. It is possible that the Grange could be interested in recommitting itself to custodianship or stewardship of the building. But as we all know, Granges are becoming more of an extinct species, unfortunately, in New Hampshire. It's a wonderful institution. Goes back to the days of agriculture when everybody or most everybody was a farmer. And unfortunately, we have fairly few farmers now, and most of the people who are members of the Grange anywhere in the state are getting to be elderly. So that remains to be seen, but that's a possibility, certainly. And the Grange people of today are still very anxious about that building and very much interested in its future.
Good. And I guess it's worth saying, we'll have a conversation at a later point about the long-term future of the building, but ultimately, just like with Village School or whatever, if there were a decision by the board or a desire by the board to get rid of the building, that's a warrant article. So it would definitely be something that would come up at town meeting, and I don't know if it would be as impassioned as the clock tower or not, but there would definitely be an opportunity for public discussion. And honestly, if we started heading down that road, or maybe even at the beginning of the discussions about the long-term future, I would certainly like to have a public hearing, give people the opportunity to at least come by and give us some thoughts before we go down the road. It's one of those historical pieces of town that I think some people might have strong feelings about. I think the general feeling of the board for as long as I've been on it is that we're not really in the business of being landlords. So it's a big issue to unpack, and I think that's for another day. But it sounds like we're all kind of on board that we want to try to move ahead and file at least the letter of intent to apply for this grant. And then if it's okay with you guys, I'm happy to be the liaison with Mr. Garvin to go through the application process and work with Josh to get him access to the building for photographs and things like that. Cool with that?
I'm totally good with that, but I have experience writing grants, so
Oh, great.
I would be happy to be like set of eyes somewhere.
Fantastic. Awesome. Yes, that would be super helpful. Okay. Thank you very much, Jim, for coming tonight. Appreciate all of it, and I'll be in touch, probably via email, and we'll set up some time to get in the building and discuss sort of next steps.
Great.
And I'll bring regular updates to meetings as is pertinent.
Thank you very much. Thank you all of you. Appreciate it.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
All right. That's AA. Any other questions on that before we move on? Okay. So the next one, 8B, is the RFP process for Hillsborough. I'm going to give Patty a chance to talk if she can, but she didn't take some notes, so I'll just read what's in here briefly. There's 2 documents in the drive. Deerfield, when they went out to bid, I guess the way to put it, they chose to do an RFQ and then an RFP. The RFQ gave the committee the opportunity to meet with each of the firms and determine which firms had the qualifications they were looking for. Those firms were asked to submit an RFP, and from there, the candidate was chosen by the board. And Patty said, if you decide which process you'd like to use, you could have the committee tailor the document to Pembroke, and a decision does not need to be made tonight. Patty, is there anything else that you want to say before we open up for discussion?
About the process, and it asked whether she had a recommendation to go in one direction or the other. And she said, you know what, a lot of our districts have not chosen to do an RFQ process, but Deerfield seemed pleased with that process because it gave them an extra opportunity to meet with the firms and be sure before they even submitted an RFP that it was a firm that had experience with schools and, presented a team that they felt they could work with and that would be able to do the job and be collaborative and all of the qualities that they were looking for in a firm.
Okay, do you know I don't know if this is okay, is it possible for us to reach out to Deerfield to ask them for the firms that reached out to them so we have an idea of who's out there and how many RFPs they received and things like that?
We have all of that information at the SAU.
Okay. So I guess the question tonight for general consensus is, do we want to do an RFQ and an RFP, or do we just want to go out for proposals? Does anybody have a strong preference? I mean, I don't have a strong preference either way. I'm not as familiar with the RFQ process as I am with the RFP process. And I guess I would lean towards just going to the RFP if for no other reason than it takes a step out. And I'm sort of concerned about our timeline a little bit. So, if we can cut a couple of weeks or a month out of the equation, that sounds appealing to me. But I'm certainly open to suggestions.
I Great, thank you. What I was going to say is, since Deerfield has been through this and the SAU has all the information, I think we can get by with just the RFP.
Yeah, I'm sure
Somebody else
Zach,
has done legwork.
yeah, I'm sure Zach would be willing to share information too.
Yeah.
So, Stacey?
I agree.
I'm more familiar with RFP, but that's the only reason why it's my preference, because I'm not really unsure how
Okay.
the other one works or the timeline.
I guess I would ask Josh if he has any comment on this since it involves facilities.
Well, I would just say that time is of the essence. We're heading into year 4 next year, as Mr. Foss just asked, and to save any bit of time at this point in time, not to take away from the process or the monetary figures attached would be a benefit for the board.
Okay. So Patty, sounds like the consensus in the room is that we can skip the RFQ and we will reach out to you guys about the Deerfield process to share some information, to start us down the track. Does that seem reasonable? Can you hear me, Patty? I got one bar in there. I'm so sorry.
I have 2 bars.
Hey, how much of that did you hear? Okay, so yeah, it sounds like the consensus around the room is to skip the RFQ, but lean on your office to provide us some information from what Deerfield was able to dig up, whatever's helpful. Okay, is there anything else that you need from us tonight, or are we just, is Amber the one that actually writes up the RFP, or who does that?
He worked on it, but Deerfield was a little bit unique, but someone on the board is actually works for a construction firm that does schools. We have a lot of background knowledge, but the committee did work and things we interviews. So I'm not sure if Kevin was intending to continue with the committee or whether it's to move forward, but it really does need to be a committee assembled to be ready to meet when our RFPs come in to review them, and then the committee will make a recommendation.
Okay, so not to put you on the spot, it's, I thoroughly appreciate everything the time that you've dedicated to this so far. So if you want to bow out, certainly, don't feel
We've
obligated.
gone this far, right? It's a little more.
But so,
I guess I defer to what you guys need from me, and I'm sure everybody else that was on that committee too.
yeah, I guess the first thing
Or
I
any
ask,
of the 3 committees for that.
if you can email the latest committee membership and see how many of them are willing to continue their participation.
Sure.
That'd be a good first step, and let me know, and then we can kind of decide if we need to reach out for more volunteers or not. I think I would love to use everybody that's already familiar with the situation, but I understand if, priorities have shifted or obligations have changed. So if you can get that information, that'd be a good starting place. Is there anything else that we need to discuss tonight, Patty, in your view?
No, I couldn't hear it. I'm assuming that was Kevin, and it seems like he agreed to stay on as the chair.
So he's gonna reach out to he nodded that he would continue and said, I've made it this far. So I'm gonna take that as signing back up. But he's gonna reach out to the membership of the latest committee and see how many of them are willing to continue. And then if it's not many, we can, reach out for volunteers again. If it's a good chunk, then we'll go with what we have. And then we can discuss more at our work session later in the month, requirements and next steps.
Sure.
Any questions from the board before we move on?
Do either of your new board members need copies of that report? Yes.
Yeah, Patty, was that in the drive last year? I think it was.
I didn't hear.
The report from Kevin's committee.
We do have it somewhere.
Yeah, we should.
Put it in the drive.
Yeah, just so that Stacy and Melanie have a copy. It looks like Kevin's pulling out paper copies too, maybe, so he can provide those. But we should get it in this year's packet somewhere anyway.
Because I don't have access to anything
Right.
for
Right.
last meeting.
I've seen it, but if we could put it back in.
Yeah. So if we can ask Kathy to put that in, I guess we'll just put it in the folder for the next meeting so that everybody's got it.
Sure. And I might never start it mention folder too, so that everything can be in one kind of specific meeting date.
Yeah, that's probably a better idea. Okay. All right, then we will move on to 8C, which is a budget update. So once again, Patty left some notes, so I'll read this and then see if she wants to add anything and then open it up for questions. So for the new folks, we start getting these about this time every year to sort of keep an eye on the surplus number. Nothing is final, obviously, for a good long time. Retirements can still happen that change the numbers. Lots of stuff can happen. So this is a snapshot in time, but we use it as a reference point. So right now, the surplus number is currently sitting at $709,488.89. And then the note just says Amber will keep these reports updated, and they'll be presented to the board on a monthly basis so that you can see the areas that are running a surplus or might be overexpended. And I think there was something in the drive too. There's an enrollment tracking sheet. So we've been looking at those pretty regularly too. So you can check that out. And then there's also a year-to-date summary in there as well. Anything else to add on that, Patty?
That was it.
Okay, any questions about the current state of the budget? Okay, so we'll keep an eye on that for sure. And the next one is 8D, the ESSER spending plan. So I've got notes for that one too. Trying to save Patty's voice as much as I can. I had whatever she has last week and could barely talk, so I feel for you. So ESSER 3 spending plan, it says we've been allocated $1,779,473.18 to be spent by 9/3024. I think that's probably a typo. 3,024 is what it says in my notes. Patty, I'm assuming that's, so yeah, we just missed a slash. So September 30th of 2024, is that correct? Yeah. It says more grant information will be provided next week at the SAU board meeting. Josh has been working with Honeywell to determine what priorities may be for health and safety for facilities. The priorities that have been identified so far total 938,600. So it's roughly half of the grant money that's available. Since the Honeywell proposal is such a significant amount of money, Patty would like the board to review this proposal with Josh and ask any questions that we might have before we move forward. It says the grant can be revised at any time, but a construction project involves a pretty thorough application process, which Josh is working on. And it says in the near future, we will provide you with a list of other activities that we'll be writing to use with the remaining allocation. So Josh, if you want to add any color to that.
So we have been working with Honeywell to identify HVAC and heating infrastructure needs within the district. Long prior to working with them on this round, we already knew we needed boilers, gas-fired boilers here at Pembroke Academy. Those were our most pressing needs within the district. We do have a lot of items aging, but again, these gas-fired boilers they're in a state of disrepair at this point in time. They're seeping at the headers. They're very tough to maintain and keep operational. They've been labeled by our insurance company that, they need to either be new or somehow fixed. And within those funds that you just spoke about, we would look to replace there's 3 gas-fired boilers here, but there's really 4. At one point in time, one failed out and they just got rid of it. It never got replaced. And we would also be looking to replace the domestic hot water boiler, which is in the same room. So it's 5 boilers in that room. Their life has been extended due to the wood chip plant. And should we go new, their life will be extended as well from that wood chip plant. These boilers are very important here at PA because they're run in seasonal changes. So right now we're running those boilers. We turned off our wood chip plant a couple weeks ago. And they are used as secondary heating sources when it's 10 degrees out with a wind chill of -20. They're used as the overtime boilers. And they're also used should the wood chip plant fail, they're our secondary form. So they're very important at this point in time. And when we saw this come up, saw the ESSER funds come up, and I was asked to identify our biggest need. This is our biggest need in the district. So it would be 5 boilers to include hot water. And just a little basis on the boilers is this is our bones that's pushing the hot water out to our HVAC that's coming into this building. And it's also the hot water side is what's allowing us to push hot water everywhere in this building, which is 160,000 square feet. The only place the boilers aren't providing hot water is the kitchen and the cooking room, which have a separate hot water heater. So that's the cliff notes per se.
Okay. And so the identified priorities so far, according to Patty's notes, were 938,000 and change. Curious of that amount, what do the 5 boilers represent?
All of that.
That's all. So
Yeah.
that money is just the boilers.
That money is just the boilers, but that includes the heating pumps that go with it, the electrical infrastructure within the room, the DVC computer, the add-ons to all of that, which is our central computer base. So that is everything.
Awesome. And so I know I won't hold you to it, but knowing that they're secondary, they're not our primary heat source, what's the life expectancy on boilers like that? If we get all new stuff, we're set for
20, 30 years. Making up a time frame. 20 is good. If we got 30, that's good. These are in mid-20s roughly. But if we get new, start new, maintain from new, the primary sources that would chip plant still. So I would see that life get extended, and certainly would hope I'm never here asking you guys for a new boiler here at Pembroke Academy in my time.
right. And last question I have about that is it being 25, so they were put in pre-2000.
They're roughly around 2000.
So is it fair to assume that new equipment would also have just energy efficiencies due to technology improvements?
Yep, for sure. So this would be in conjunction with everything we've done pre-COVID with Honeywell as well. So these would be the same boilers that we're using at the Hill School, the same boilers that we were using at the Village School. The controls would all be centralized with what we've put into this district as well. So maintenance-wise, it's units that we already know. So they might be a little bit bigger per se, but it's the same manufacturer coming in from the same company, which allows us to obviously and hopefully maintain those a lot better.
Awesome. Questions from the board?
I don't have questions about what Josh just said, but the other ESSER funds, are those designated for other areas?
Patty, did you hear the question?
I did. Yes. So the remaining ESSER funds, we've been meeting as a leadership team and discussing a budgeting plan over the next couple of years of how we would like to see those funds used. And we were talking about things like math coaches, literacy coaches, therapists to provide intervention, speech intervention, so all the learning loss and social emotional needs that the community and staff reflected were priority spending for them on grants. So those things are in works, but this was such a significant chunk out of that grant that I would not want to move forward on a program such as this without coming before the board. So Josh was gracious enough to explain the boiler system like I would not be able to. He's working on the 10-page application. The Department of Education has given us the preliminary approval to move forward. So I was just looking for the board to support this program.
Thank you.
I just had a quick question. Numbers that you have for those 5 boilers, those are somewhat recent in as far as like pricing wise?
Those are as of November.
As of November?
Yeah, and I'm in constant contact with Honeywell as well. So we've talked this week knowing that I was going to be here talking to you guys about this tonight.
Okay.
And that's still a confident number.
It is, okay.
Yeah.
Just checking, because I know like a lot of plumbing supply stuff is
It's
up about 33% on some things. And do you know what kind of boilers? You said they're 20 to 30 year lifespan. Do we know what they're thinking of? Like what manufacturer or?
You know, I should have that answer, but I don't.
That's okay. Just curious.
But they are what we use within the district.
Good,
I'm just
okay.
drawing the blank.
That's all right.
Others?
Hi, everybody. Sorry I'm late being in person. I got stuck in Boston at a medical appointment for my kiddo. So I just had a comment / question. It seems like maybe the train has already left the station on this, but I wonder if you could just address my concern that the school maybe isn't decarbonizing enough. Like, you know, why not invest in heat pumps and solar panels and things that are going to be even more fuel efficient and better for the environment and all that good stuff?
So on that end, we are getting energy efficient heating pumps when Honeywell comes in, does our projects. We do have 261 solar panels on top of the academic wing here at Pembroke Academy. We have LED lights making up a number, 90% of those, the lights district-wide are LED. We really looked at that at the last project. It was roughly $4 million, and most of those were all energy upgrades. So to include the energy upgrades, we talk about our computer a lot. We have a centralized heating computer that allows us to program heat to come on, come off, HVAC to come on, come off. It's not just running all the time. And those are some of the improvements we've made throughout the time. The need for these is these are failing. So if these fail, which they could fail at any point in time, we don't have that secondary source of heating here at Pembroke Academy. Because if the wood chip plant goes down and these are waiting for whatever part coming out of wherever, we won't be able to heat this building.
No, I mean, aren't there other backups? Other types of backups?
For heat,
Yeah,
so like another wood chip boiler or a pellet boiler, we have to heat by a boiler at this size of the building. We can't heat per se of what's known as like a furnace that we have at home. It's got to be that size because we're pushing so much water throughout these buildings that we got to have the pressure to in the temp to heat that water, to push it, heat it, and get it to where it needs to go.
And I think part of the answer, if I understand things correctly, is that the wood chip plant is more efficient and more environmentally friendly, and that's our primary. So I think the intention is to be as conscious as possible, but these are more of a backup system.
So we use that wood chip plant as long as we possibly can keep it running. That's our goal. It's fueled by chips that could come anywhere from Pembroke, New Hampshire, all the way to Gorham, New Hampshire. We're getting them locally sourced as much as we can, trying to keep as much of those funds as local to Pembroke, New Hampshire as we possibly can. But we have to have that secondary source. And in this case, that's natural gas. So we are very fortunate that we have a natural gas line into our area. There are many districts that are burning oil, which we are long out of oil. All our tanks have been removed. And there are districts using propane as we are at the modular, and the price of propane is through the roof. Right now, we have a 4-year term on our natural gas coming into this building. We're paying, making up the numbers, something like 57 cents a therm. So that's the measured unit that we're just fortunate to have that ability.
no, I agree. And I think it seems like you've set us up in the best possible situation. And I'm really happy to hear about the last project's focus and all those environmental gains. So thanks, Josh.
Thank you.
Any other questions before we take a poll? So Patty's looking for general support of Josh's proposal. So I guess last chance for discussion, and I'd like to hear opinions, support or not. Anybody? Listeners?
Yeah, I'm good with the proposal. If we're running on 3 backups right now, plus what, a 4th for hot water currently, or no?
So the hot water is separate,
Right.
even though I talk about them as one. It's the same room. They're almost identical units, but the hot water is just touching the domestic hot water
Right.
coming out of the faucet. We're running on 3. That this building was made for 4 with the size that we'll be asking for. And again, that one failed at some point long before me, and it was just removed. You know, if a boiler failed to the point of not being able to run, I'd be here the next Tuesday after talking to Patty for the last 5 days, every single day, all day, and here we would be talking about it. That was missed. I don't know when it happened, and I can't speak for that. I can only speak for what we need to do, and what we should do to keep this building and these buildings operational.
Others?
I'm okay with it and I'm in support of it. My only thing, I would give him permission to move forward, like I'm totally okay. And I think we should go for the 5, that makes more sense. My only concern would be making sure we lock something in writing, because I would hate to see that number go up or beyond what the grant funds are, because I'm seeing that happen every single week. That's my only concern.
So again, we're in constant communication with Honeywell. Part of the process with this phase of the ESSER is getting the local authority, which you guys are talking about right now, which will allow me to, I'm waiting on one part of the historical reference, believe it or not, to come back. This will allow us to push this through and move through with Honeywell. And I get the having it in writing, and I'm more than okay, and they are okay with doing that. We have just a strong relationship with them over the last 15 to 20 years that we're in constant communication. We talk every day, and that number is strong as of today. And that's the thing, like we try and go a little bit strong because things change. The other side of Honeywell is specifically while they're here doing those, they do so much more for us that if I actually put it on paper, like it's amazing, because they're always fixing this or helping us there, or this fails, and that just goes right into these projects at this time. And I can't say how lucky we are to have that relationship.
That's good to know. Others?
I'm good.
Stacy? Okay. Me too. I did have one more question though. So, I guess they're close to end of life. I'm assuming we were going to need to fix or replace regardless of ESSER. So where would these funds have come from? And is this a savings for the taxpayer? Is this a different grant that you now don't have to write? Is it transfer from a trust fund that we don't need to do now?
So these wouldn't have come from the trust, from a grant. It wouldn't have come from the budget. It's been specifically the quote unquote, the big number trust fund that we've been going after that we just got voted on this year. And that's where we would have come and said, hey, we need some boilers.
Okay, so do you think it would be reasonable to say that, blanking on the word, deposits to that trust fund could be possibly lowered for future years if these funds are coming from there?
No, I don't, because we have HVAC that's just aging. So I would be on the record to say that when we talk about that specific trust fund every year, we talk about $100,000 or $200,000 being deposited. This year it was voted on for 125. If that money is there and can be allocated, that balance might be $200-300 right now. And we came up with a plan 3, 4, 5 years ago. We finally just got that voted on. We missed all those years in between, and things are coming up. So a roof, there's big discussion about that's such a big number, and we need to be careful with it. A roof could eat that number up in a day. You're learning today a boiler could eat that number up in a day. As an example, the academic wing is built in 2000. That means all that infrastructure is 2000. Things are made for 20, 30 years. Buildings are made for 40, 50 years. And that was the whole object of years ago of trying to put a little bit away that you guys were in favor of this year, and it showed from the taxpayers. So that number won't be, we really need to push heavier on that number in the years.
But to sort of see the balance then, well, I'm thinking about this from the public's perspective. Really what we're doing then is we're making up for missed years of deposits to those trust funds that we in a perfect world should have made to set ourselves up better. These funds are kind of bailing us out, if you want to use that terminology.
I would take it to the step of we're making up in that sense, but we're very fortunate to have this money coming in, that we're very fortunate that everybody around us in this circle has supported spending a good chunk on something we truly need. And
okay, I just wanted to make sure I
thing.
understood. Okay, yeah, I support it as well, so it sounds like everybody's on board. Yes?
having, I don't know if Josh needs it for the application, but just in case he does, would you mind doing a motion, asking for a motion to move forward with this project?
Happy to.
So moved.
So moved.
I'll second it.
You need language, Sandy, or you good?
To authorize the.
I think we should say in an amount not to exceed.
938,600.
Yes.
Second?
Yes.
Did you include that it was, with using it, ESSER funds?
Yeah.
Give Sandy a second, then have her read it.
That 938,600.
Thirty-eight thousand 600.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Fantastic.
Thank you.
Patty, I guess I have a follow-up question. Will the rest of the ESSER funds be going towards student need? So in what, everything that you just listed is falling under that loss of skill from COVID. Will the rest of those funds?
Yes, we, everything else is, that we've discussed thus far will be directly student impact. There's still some furniture for social distancing, but it's all for students, and this, the significance of this funding, as Andy said before, this would definitely have been a tax impact. But because some schools were caught off guard in much worse shape than we were, HVAC systems and meeting national standards is a perfect opportunity. So it is the health and safety of the students. But to get to your question, yes, it's direct student intervention will be the remaining.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this item before we move forward? Okay, then we added letter E under 8. That was a request from Ms. Manzelli to discuss sort of at least the process, a general discussion of the process around evaluation for the superintendent. So Amy, I'll let you take it away.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, I come to the discussion with a feeling, not certain, but a feeling that we're overdue in our obligation to see that the superintendent has an evaluation. But beyond that, I don't really know much about really the frequency with which evaluation is supposed to happen or the process. So I wanted to just make sure my feeling is right, or at least that we have a consensus that it's time to have an evaluation. And so long as we do, then I wanted to move on to well, how does that happen? And sort of get a work plan in place to get that going.
Okay, so what I can share, and then I'll ask Patty because she's been here longer. We do, I'm jumping ahead on the agenda a little bit, but we do have Vera Christina from NHSBA that's going to attend our work session on May 17th to do some of the new school board member training. But I also want to talk about this with him. He's got a whole lot of resources around how evaluations work. The other piece is Ms. Sherman and Mr. Warburton both work for the SAU. So I think, I could be wrong, Patty can correct me, I think the official review has to come from the SAU board, but obviously as Patty's primary district, we would be asked to write up something, have significant input on that. So Patty, do you want to add some color as far as the process goes?
Sure. So earlier in the year, we had a discussion at the executive board level, and Peter and I proposed, because the districts are divided, even though we are officially employed by the full SAU board, that it made more sense for us to work with each of our individual boards to have specific goals. So I would have a specific Pembroke School District goal. Peter would have goals specific to his districts, and then we would also work on developing a goal that would be SAU wide. And then that information, so we would work individually and non-public with our boards our specific goals, and then the executive board, I would assume, and that was the conversation we had earlier in the year, the executive board would be responsible for sort of writing up the summary evaluation from that process.
So, and I think you and I had spoken, but my intention at least is to have our board goals done much earlier this year before we break. And I was actually targeting that same meeting because I think having Barrett in the room to help us with goals is worthy too. So it sounds like we need to set goals for Patty, and that might be a good night to do that as well. We do a non-public session on 3/17 to discuss goals for Patty. 5/17. What did I say? 3? Well, I'm at May 5/17. And that gives us a minute to think things up and go through our own heads and see where we want to go with those things. And then, we'll send that information up to the SAU exec board, and then they have a criteria to evaluate Patty against over the coming year. That everybody okay?
I'm so unfamiliar with the process, and things in government are so different than in the corporate world. Not that my small law firm is big corporate, but I guess I had in mind that the performance evaluation would occur like this academic year, but I think what you just said would result in a performance evaluation like in June of 2023.
I think it would be earlier than June, but I think we'd be setting goals for the coming academic year and then evaluating after that. I'm not sure. I would want expertise from the exec board, and there's members there that have been around longer than I have, as far as doing anything sooner. I know that the SAU board as a whole voted on contract extensions for both Peter and Patty. I'll say recently because my brain doesn't work any better than that. So yeah, I'm not sure how that would work, but we can certainly inquire with the exec board.
And I, again, just being new to the process, and this has nothing to do actually with, anything to do with Peter or Patty. But I, again, being new to the process, assumed that it would be more generic, like things that every superintendent in the United States is expected to do, not specific to goals, but more like baseline kind of stuff. So there wouldn't need to be a process associated with identifying what are the things that we're going to be evaluating against. There would just be some sort of standardized, like, the things that most professionals would be evaluated against when you have a performance evaluation. But maybe that's part of what Barrett can advise us about.
Yeah, and like I said, I think there's expertise on the exec board too. There's some folks that have been doing this for a long time. Personally, I think it probably is both. Like you said, there's standard things, communication and blah, 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 that are just staples of a professional job. But then I think evaluating against specific goals that we want to see happen in the district is probably reasonable as well. So
that makes a lot of sense to me as well.
I'm not sure. It may be too late to get on the exec board agenda since there's a meeting next Wednesday. But I can reach out to, forget who, well, I guess there isn't a chair of it, right, until next week.
Knowing that Pembroke
Was not, that's a, yeah, that's what Patty said, so, but, I can start those communications and copy you so that you can make sure I'm representing things correctly. We can figure that out. Yeah, anything else anybody wants to add on that before we move on? Patty, is there anything that you want to add to that discussion?
No, that's not for tonight. Thank you.
Okay. Good. Okay, and are you gonna say that I missed the technology trust fund thing? Yep, so I missed an item for agenda review, so I'm going to do that now and add an 8F. Patty left me a note that says, approved budget cuts for 2022, 2023, allocated 17,853 to be taken from the technology trust fund. So you'll remember that's, after the very first budget presentation, Patty and the administration came back with a list of roughly $300,000 that moved cut a couple of things, but mostly it moved funding around to utilize trust funds more to lower the tax impact. So in that document, almost $18,000 was moved to be taken out of the technology trust fund. There are no restrictions on fiscal years for trust funds, and our IT department would like to get a jump on ordering and installing the NAS backups and switches that we discussed. Does the board have any objection to this work starting? And then she notes again, we are agents to expend, but a public hearing would be held before the funds are transferred from the trust fund. But we can authorize now that the IT department start the legwork to get this stuff rolling. And we'd have to do another public hearing, which I'm guessing, Patty, correct me if I'm wrong, with the length of time that those typically take, we could probably do both in the same night. Okay. Okay. So, do you need a motion tonight or just consensus? Yeah. I know Peter always says just do a motion. So questions for Patty around this? It's the network attached storage, is what NAS stands for, in case anybody's not aware. And it's stuff that was on the list that we talked about in budget season. It's just authorizing that we use the trust fund money from the IT, the technology trust fund, so it doesn't come out of the budget, as was the plan. Are there any questions, clarifications, things that we want to ask from Mr. Berube, anything like that? Then I'll accept a motion to approve the IT department to begin the work of ordering and installing NAS backups and switches. Anybody's so inclined.
If you add a not to exceed amount in there, then I will so move that.
Okay. Second. Okay. So a motion and a second to approve the IT department to move forward on ordering and installing network attached storage backups and switches in an amount not to exceed $17,853. That good, Patty? Okay. Any discussion? I gotta start sitting. Okay, then all in favor of the motion as stated, please say aye.
Aye.
I can say it again, probably. I mean, it's the meat of it is in my notes here. I think too.
I'm going to abstain.
Okay. And any opposed? So 4 and 0 and 1. So. Anything else on that, Patty, before I move on? Did I forget anything? Okay. All right, that gets us through the meat of number 8. Is there anything that I missed? Anything that anybody needs clarification on before we move on? I feel like that was a lot of business. Get stuff done. Okay, so that moves us to number 9, which is policy. Couple of notes on that from Patty. Kathy made the changes to BEDH, and if it's if our policy committee agrees, I think we're ready to take action on that one. The social media one, Patty would like to ask Barrett about that on 517. So it sounds like if everybody's okay, we'll table that one again. And then the first reading ones, we generally, for people, in case you're not familiar, we don't take action on those anyway. Those show up on the agendas to give everybody a chance to review. And then we can also take action if everybody's comfortable with ACG because it's a withdrawal. So I guess Jean and Melanie, is there anything that you want to comment on any of those?
Nothing more than what we've discussed prior, other than changing the rules of order, number 5. I don't have the old one to read, but in the sample policies that we had, it gave us 2 choices. One limiting comment to specific agenda items. The other one saying, yeah, we can talk about anything we want to as long as it pertains to the schools. Or public concern with the schools. And Kathy has changed that on the policy here. Everything else remained the same, removing any of the yellow stuff that we had seen in the prior versions of this. So we've had a lot of discussion about it in the past. So I think at this point in time, we're ready to. That has been changed to what we have all agreed on.
Statement.
The or statement, yeah, the or statement. That clarifies it. And I don't know if you're privy to any of that discussion. So, if you feel more comfortable, I mean.
Can I just clarify? So we chose the more expansive one,
Right.
the one that public comment can be anything related to the schools.
Yeah.
There's still some restrictions,
yeah.
Right, but
Things that would
it's
be-
not like,
yeah.
if it's not on the agenda, you can't talk about it.
Correct.
We did not choose that one.
Right.
So, I mean, we have all discussed it here, aside from Stacy. We could take action if you don't want to, if you want to abstain, that's fine. Or you can look at it next time, we can look at it. Okay.
Okay, then I'll accept the motion on any of these that folks are ready to take action.
I'll make a motion to accept the BEDH, public participation at board meetings, our revised draft one that's in the drive.
Okay. For a second.
I'll second that.
Okay, any further discussion on BEDH? Good. Okay, all in favor of approving policy adopting policy BEDH, public participation at board meetings as amended in our drive, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And abstentions?
Aye.
All right, that's one. Is everybody okay with waiting on social media a little bit longer so we get some input from the School Board Association? Okay, then do people want to move on the withdrawal of ACG, or you want to lump that in with the other first readings and wait until next time? Yes.
Withdrawal of that policy was because another policy was put in its place, which you haven't adopted yet. So I think you should do those.
Oh, okay. Thank you for that. Yep. Okay, so we'll wait on that one so that we can see the corresponding policy. So any other questions around policy in general before we move on?
No, but can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
Can we take a look at can we have somebody or have Patty have somebody look at the first reading folder in our drive for the first reading policies? Normally, I can print them with the school board recommended one, and I can look at them on paper together. For whatever reason, in this folder, it says you cannot print this file. I was not able to print these out and look and see what the recommended from the School Board Association is and what ours is. And I'm a paper person, so I like to look and make sure we have everything there.
Okay.
And they
Yeah.
wouldn't let me print this time, and I've never had that.
Okay, so Patty, I guess if Kathy can just take a quick look and see if there's something different with the permissions. Melanie said she wasn't able to print those documents.
Sure. And if we can't fix it, I'm happy to print them and you can pick them up if you want to.
Anything else on policy? Okay, that brings us to agenda item number 10, which is our second public comment section. So same rules as the first. Keep it 15 minutes, 3 minutes each. Give us your name if you want to make a comment. The mic is open. Sort of, it's low.
Amber White, off of Borough Road. I have read policies and procedures regarding the superintendent evaluations, and they're supposed to be done every year. Thank you.
Thank you. Others? Okay, seeing none. We do have some informational items for number 11. So Patty notes that the schedule has been released for the 2022-2023 school year. She let me know that they did a sort of master schedule this year that has all of the school boards, and I think is exec board on there as well, Patty. So they're gonna present that at the SAU board meeting next week. So we'll all get a copy of that. I might ask if Kathy can swing it. If maybe that could be translated to a Google Calendar that we could subscribe to, so they would just pop up on our devices. That would be wonderful.
School board calendar handy already.
Oh, great.
You don't have it subscribed to it yet. I can have her send the link. And when she puts these new meetings into the calendar, they'll automatically populate.
Yeah, she can send that to all of us just in case anybody doesn't have it. That'd be fantastic. And then, as I mentioned before, we've got Barrett lined up for 517 for some training for our new members and just kind of question and answer that anybody might have. We've got a couple of topics that we are kind of asking for some advice on. If there's anything specific that anybody plans on asking you, if you can send those to me and Patty ahead of time so that Barrett can come as prepared as possible for whatever we're going to ask him. That would be good. Other informational items, we did ask Patty to make arrangements for some sort of appreciation gesture for our teachers. And the schoolie bus is scheduled to come next week, I believe. And Patty reports that word has gotten out a little bit and the teachers are very excited. It was a big hit last year, so we're glad to be able to do that. And last but not least, I got definitely the coolest letter of my tenure on the board so far, and I wanted to read it out loud. It was addressed to me sadly in the drive, you don't have a picture of the envelope that it came in. I can say with some certainty that the person that addressed this was addressed to me, but at the SAU office, and judging by handwriting, it was definitely a young person. So I just want to read this out loud. It says, "Dear school board members, I want better school lunches because some kids don't want to have yogurt and cereal every day for lunch. The school lunches aren't healthy at all, like having pizza 3 days a week. Kids should have healthier lunch choices to give them more energy at recess. I know you might have a tight budget, but just changing pizza 3 days a week will be a lot healthier. That is why I want healthier school lunches. Sincerely, Annabelle Hancock." So that may be a discussion for another time, but I appreciate input, and we always love when students bring issues to us. I think that's the most direct contact that we ever get is when we get to talk to the students. So very much appreciated, and I'll write her a response. I think that's it for informational items. Patty, anything that I missed?
No, that's it.
Okay. So hold on, let me get my letters. Sure, go ahead.
My question was concerning prom and the gas policy. I guess what I wanted to know, was it sufficient? Did it address the majority of the needs, and is everybody happy?
Everyone's happy.
All right.
Yeah, for this
Yeah,
year,
okay.
we're good.
No, yeah, I meant to ask you that earlier, and I completely missed it, so.
I did have one question today, or yesterday afternoon. Can a guest come if they are not enrolled in high school but are enrolled in middle school? I did say no to that. Felt like that was an easy.
Fair.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, then the board does need to go into non-public session under New Hampshire RSA 91-A:3, Roman numeral 2, small letters A and C. Small letter A is pertaining to the dismissal, promotion, compensation, or disciplining of an employee or the investigation of any charges against him or her. Small letter C is matters which, if discussed in public, would likely affect adversely the reputation of any person other than a member of the board. So all in favor, I'm sorry, I think I need a roll call vote. I can never remember. I'll do it anyway. Right. In favor of entering non-public session at 8:46, Melanie,
Yes.
Jean,
Yes.
Stacy,
Yes.
and Amy's out of the room, so I guess Andy, yes. And so we'll pause the recording and ask folks to.
I can get going if that's okay. I'll move to seal the minutes of the non-public.
Second. All in favor of sealing the minutes from non-public session, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Great. Okay, is there a motion?
I move to accept the resignation.
Second.
I'll second it.
Discussions, no discussion. All in favor of accepting the letter of resignation, please say aye.
Aye.
Abstentions? Great, so there is an SAU full board meeting next Wednesday, the 30th, 6 p.m. And note that that's at Deerfield. And our next scheduled school board meeting is April 19th, 2022, 6:30. Our agenda tonight says cafeteria, but the intention is to stay in the library now for as long as it's feasible. And I think we decided that at that next meeting, there's going to be a public hearing at 6:30 on the nose. So we'll open that first and then move right into our regularly scheduled work session. Agenda to come. And if anybody doesn't have any more questions, I'll accept motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.